from a technical perspective as well, the game is deployed on stopit.torc.no currently. And the way it works is that basically you can create games in a couch-like version. So basically the one player will create the game and then you will get an ID which we can use to join the game for everyone. But you can also just use the link, it's easier. So regarding the capabilities, there is no theoretical limitation of the number of players and users. In practice, we are limited by the server, but to be honest, I don't really know what is this threshold. It's really limited by the server, and right now the server we are using is not the most powerful in the world, but we haven't reached that threshold yet. So maybe we can test at the end of the game and see if we can deal with more than 50 players. But we have been up to 12 for now. All right, so let's give some information about the game, how it would work in a real life situation. So for the game to work, you have two things, or three things in reality. The digital game, the game itself. Then we need also an audio channel for the players to discuss, so it can be a Teams meeting like just now. And then, as Rita said, we have some scenarios that are prepared in advance. So the facilitator, I will come back to that, but with the person who is the game master, basically, has prepared a game scenario in advance and some supporting documents, like one supporting document, basically with some figures if they want to show, like, for instance, the water network map, things like this. And so yeah, on one side we can have like the audio channel, and then the game is the main thing that is open in front of the players, plus sometimes they have to check the supporting documents when the facilitator says so. So Rita also mentioned that a little bit, but we have four main roles that are in the game. The first one is the facilitator. So that's the person who creates the game and basically is the game master, the trainer, basically. Then we have the players, which are like the decision maker and the regular players. So the decision maker is a player with one specific role in particular, that he is the one taking decisions, and in the digital talk he's also the one who leads the discussion, meaning that he has extra controls. Sometimes I will show you that later, but he can control part of the game as well, moving forward or backward at some point. And there is only one decision maker per game, and also one facilitator. Then yeah, we have the regular player, how many we want, but I think in the board game, the paper version, it's less than 10 player. And then we have observers, which is, well, basically observers, how the name says. Basically, they can just see what's happening during the game, and they can also provide inputs if they want to. So to help you understand better, because the view will change depending on which role you have. So now, from now on in the presentation, I will show on the right hand corner the roles of the player I'm showing on the screen. So that can help you also see what I'm showing. But basically, only one facilitator and one decision maker is needed to play a game, even though it doesn't make sense. But the decision maker is a mandatory role. So when it comes to the game, so that's what Rita explained just before. Basically, the game is made of a few steps. The first one is the framing and setting the scene. So basically, in this step, the facilitator will set the context of the game and also give an explanation of the stressor. Then we have the awareness and the impact assessments. So those two stage, the goal is to understand what's happening, what's the situation, understanding the stressor, and as Rita said, brainstorming about it and trying to understand what is the possible impact of it. And then the next three are more to put the players in the situation of, okay, now we understood what is happening, what's the problem, what could we do in a real life or in our organization to prevent that situation from happening, or to detect it, or just to mitigate if it happens. So that's up to decision. It's one round, and in the game we can actually have several rounds in a row. So we could go back to framing and setting the scene, and with having a new stressor as well, or you can just finish the game. And the general value, it's basically, as Rita said as well on the paper version, we create some value. So we have some recommendation that we can take away basically from the game. All right, so that's the main user interface. So as I said before, like this board might change depending on the screenshot because of the versions that differs depending on what I used yesterday. But basically, this is the main board, and you can see we start in framing the scene, and then we go around and then to general value. So you also have always like the players and the roles, so you can see who is your player and what roles you have. You can see at all time the stressor historic, and here on the right, for all players, we have the action bar, which will change depending on the player or the roles you have. So here I'm a facilitator, so I have the control, for instance, of setting the element for the game or just starting the game here, because here it's not started. And also at each new stage, there is this instruction pop-up. So to help the player understand what's happening and where we are and what we are supposed to do, each time we move from one stage to another, the instruction for that stage pops up. All right, so let's show the game on the real scenario now. So basically, as the facilitator, the first thing that the facilitator does is to set the information from the game. So here, for instance, so it's not really important to see what I put here and everything, but just to have like real content. Basically here, the facilitator set like the scene description for the game, some stressor, and also a description. So basically, he said, okay, we have this water network, and with some elements here. And the problem is that we have the behavior of the TCV is wrong since midnight. There was an alarm because the TCV remained closed, which is unusual. And also, as a result, part of the network is disconnected from the source. So that's the initial situation. And once the facilitator has done that, he can start the game. And he can explain that, and then one of the first thing he will do to set the context is also giving the players their roles. So here, for instance, we have all the players that are in the game, and we can give them some roles. So as I said before, there is this decision maker. Here it's a regular player, which is, for instance, operational specialist or IT expert, and we can also have observers. Once that's done, here it's a regular player screens, and he can see at all time they can see the information about the game. And now the idea is that the scene is like set, and they have to discuss about it. So we move on to awareness. Okay, well that's okay. Basically, the awareness phase, as I said before, is the objective is to really understand what's happening in the game, what is this stressor about, and basically what it is. So in the game we have this node functionality. So that's one of the actions possible, and the idea is for the players to discuss and try to frame what's happening. So for instance, here you can see that there was a note from the IT expert, and they ask, okay, why did the TCV remain closed? The two possibilities are that it could be like a malfunctioning on the valve side, or that something is going wrong with the controls. So then there is this condition. Okay, the TCV is open if the level is below 0.5 and closed if it's above 5.5. And so they don't know basically what it is right now. And they can interact with the facilitator because the facilitator has the game scenario and can tell them or push them in the right directions. So for instance, here, Martin suggests to send an employee to the tank and check what is the water level, basically, because it says that it's 6 meters, but is it really? And when the employee goes there, so here the facilitator replies, yes, when you go there, the tank 2 is indeed not full. So if it's not full, what does it mean? well, it means that maybe the level sensor of tank 2 is broken or has been manipulated. So at that stage, they know something is wrong with the sensor, but they don't really know what. And here they ask, can you check if there was an intrusion in the tank, for instance? And yes, the facilitator replies again, okay, the employee confirms that the door was open when they arrived and that the lock is broken, for instance. So at that stage, they have a pretty good understanding of, okay, the situation. Can someone, no, it's fine, sorry. So yeah, they have an understanding of the stressor, and now they just need to understand what's the impact of the stressor, because they know that, okay, someone broke into the tank and manipulated the sensor to make it appear like the tank is always full, but what's the impact of this? For this, we move in the impact assessment stage, where we have the ability to choose resource card. So that's basically tools from the Stop It project that we can use to assess the impact of the stressor. So in that case, they could choose, for instance, amongst those ones. And here, the decision maker needs to make a choice, but with the other players as well. And he will choose, for instance, here the cyber physical threat testing platform. And at that moment, they have chosen this, and they can discuss with the facilitator, and the facilitator can tell them, okay, that's good. That's a good tool to assess the situation. Look in the handbook at this page, at this figure, because the facilitator might have already the results of this tool. So he gives them basically the figures about this, and they realize that basically, like if the stressor remain closed for less than 4 hours, the impact of the service is not too severe, because basically it ends up in this green, in this green area. So okay, now they basically have an understanding of the stressor, what's going wrong, and what's the impact of the stressor. And now we move into the second part of the round, where we are trying to basically do what is in this inner circle. So what could we do to detect, prevent, or mitigate this stressor? So now the players have to choose among risk prediction measures cards. So same, like you can see here the actions. This is the risk prediction measures actions, and when you click on this, you get a list of all the possible cards. You can filter them as well, depending if you want cyber, RRM, cyber physical, or physical. So in that case, for instance, you can see that we have like fences and wall, motion detection, detector. Also the assets they applies to, and on which consequences they have an impact, plus some descriptions. So they are directly taken from the Stop It list here. So the players need to discuss between them what they want, what could be implemented here to, as I said, mitigate, detect, or prevent the stressor from happening, or the event. So the decision maker here will again choose, but with the other players also making it. The only thing is that the decision maker makes the choice. And here is how it looks like from when it's chosen, basically. So here, well, there are more than that, of course, for this particular stressor, but let's say they choose like motion detector, camera surveillance on patrols and binary contacts, for instance. Once they have that, they need to evaluate, as Rita said before, is it possible for our organization to do so? Because, well, there are many, and maybe they are not all possible, and doesn't make sense to make all of them. So the next phase is the feasibility evaluation. So in that case, that's one of the cases where the decision maker basically is in charge of this evaluation. So when you click on this question mark, basically you get this pop-up, and for each card that was selected before in the previous round, previous step, we have to review it, and we can add. So this is something that is subject to change, but we call that cost-benefit analysis for now. You can add elements basically that are in favor or not of choosing or implementing this this RRM basically. So, and then you can go to the next one, the previous one, etc. That's the decision maker who's doing this. You can add, for instance, here for the binary contacts. Okay, this is more effective than the motion sensor, and the cost is good, but it's also maybe worth the price. So once that's done, there is basically the need to make a real choice now. So we move to the decision phase. And in the decision phase, you see only the cards that were selected. And for all the cards, you can also review this time this analysis we did before. And now the decision maker needs to make a choice. And that's where in the real game he has the power, basically. He's the one who will eventually make the decision. So in that case, we say, okay, the decision maker decides to choose the binary contacts, for instance. So if he does that, then he needs to give a justification for why he was doing this. So then he say, okay, the binary contacts are pretty cheap in comparison with the other alternatives, but they detect effectively an eventual intrusion by sending an alarm in real time. And this is also scalable to all our tanks in the system. So basically, he justified his decision, and as it's indicated here, this will be used later on in the value card creation. So then we move on and to the general value at the round level. So this is something that is only in the digital version to help structuring the data. And in this round value creation, basically, the facilitator can basically take notes of something in that round that will be later used to create the value at the end of the game. So here, for instance, the facilitator notes that it's interesting that during this round, the trainees noticed how important it is to harden the physical security of the infrastructure. So once that's done, by clicking on the flag here, the facilitator can basically either start a new round. Basically, we'll go back to framing and setting the scene where we can have a new stressor and also change the roles for the players, or we can simply end the game. So in that case, I won't go back to start a new round, but you get the idea. If we start a new round, basically we get a new stressor, which will add up to the previous one. So you can chain basically events and create a new possible situation. But in that case, I will just finish the round. And once we finish the round, we basically get to the value creation, where you get a summary of, well, the scene, and for all rounds what happens. So you get a description of the stressor, the round review that I just spoke about, also the rationale for choosing the cards, and you can also review here all the notes for the round, the resource card that were selected, and the risk reduction measures that were selected as well. And in the end, you can add these general recommendations. So basically, what should be done in the organization. So here I just put, for instance, that they agree that they should have a plan to review and harden the physical security of their infrastructure. So that means, for instance, starting to review if there are any secreting companies that can do some rounds, or just install those binary contacts, for instance. But you can add like a list basically of recommendations here. So yeah, that's basically the idea about the game, and it tries to map as close as possible to the paper version of the board game. But as you can see, there are some challenges here which might need some tuning. The cool thing also with the digital version is that, of course, we get some, I'd say, additional feature for almost free. The first one is basically the report generation. So at the end of the game, you can see basically here, the facilitator has the possibility to generate a report based on the game. And you end up with a report that will do two things, or three things, basically. The first one is you will get this value card for the game. So you get a summary of the scenario. I will show you the report later, just after the end of the presentation. I have one that I generated. So you get basically a summary of the scenario, what happens, what are the actions that are agreed, and also all the recommendations. And then you get basically a dump of all the data in the game. So for every round, you will get everything that happened, which action were taken, the notes as well. Everything basically gets in this round summary. There is also a feedback functionality. I will come back in a moment to this. So you get also the feedback from the players, and you get all the cards that are in the game as well. So you get all this resource list, and everything is included. So also another thing, when you take note and you're like an observer or the facilitator, you can have some hidden notes. So these notes in red are only visible to observers and to the facilitators. So for instance, here in the anticipation and sense-making round step, one observer say, okay, I think they should have selected fences and wall here. So this is a comment that can be seen by the facilitator, and the facilitator can maybe choose to act on it and say, okay, maybe you guys need to think about this, or I can just let it go, and this will appear in the report at the end, so everyone can see it and maybe think about it as well. And the second type of note is the feedback note. So this is more to get feedback during the game. So the players, if they think something is bad about the game itself, something is wrong, or there is a bug or anything, it can be reported here, and it will be only visible for the player. And at the end, it will be included in the report. But that can be also a way to improve the training. For instance, here, one of the players say, okay, I think the feasibility analysis could be more guided. Here, it's not really clear what we need to do. So that's, one of the use of this feedback functionality. And lately, well, you can also create your own card, like if you can do it in real life. So basically, for the resource card, you can create your own custom card, which will be included in the report at the end, of course. You can create your own custom resource card, risk prediction measures card as well. So same, you can select what asset it applies to. And like when you have like resource cards, you can either create them from new, like from scratch, sorry, like here, or you can basically derive them. So here you can see that the employees training, for instance, we can use it as a template, and we create a new card that is derived from this one, where we can edit everything, but we can also just, for instance, here we modify the comments and the title, those kind of things.